As the title may suggest, Ash Sarkar, who you may know from such delightful soundbites as
Party, because I'm literally a communist.
is a complete idiot. A bourgeois, arrogant millennial headcase infatuated with a set of ideas she should know are not just unrealistic, but murderously dangerous. I couldn't find much on her time at University College London, but from a few pieces of information she's dropped here and there, it was clear she was heavily radicalised into the ideologue she is today. Speaking of which, she helps run Novara Media, a far-left extreme Marxist news source, I say that in inverted commas, that regularly discusses the overthrow of the capitalist system through various means. The reason I'm bringing all this to your attention, dear viewer, of course, is because Sarkar decided to make a short documentary of her libertarian communist views and meeting her hero, Franco Berardi, at the expense of the BBC. That's right. If you pay your TV licence, you are funding overtly communist propaganda. Let's take a look, shall we?
Imagine if technology meant that you didn't have to work anymore. Fully automated luxury communism.
Fully automated luxury communism, as if such a thing were possible. The only luxuries any communist experiment has wrought has been death, destruction, disease, and famine. The only luxuries conveyed upon people were placed in the hands of dictators and sycophants, violent revolutionaries, and ruthless murderers. As for automation, we're a long way off that, and if that does happen, it's already going to happen through the current capitalist means. There is no method by which a communist system can achieve this more fairly, more competently, or more speedily. Moving on.
Okay, so I am incredibly excited. So I am in Bologna to meet one of my all-time political heroes, libertarian communist legend, Franco Berardi, key figure of the autonomous movement in northern Italy in the 1970s. So that's the strain of libertarian communism which emerged out of a fragmented workers' struggle and also an insurgent student movement.
Just for reference, the autonomous movement is a movement that rejects interaction with the state as they see it as illegitimate power. They aim to subvert government and capitalist enterprise by supporting practice such as being absent, slow working, sabotage, and other subversive activities. In terms of the Italian movement, there was a heavy emphasis on feminism and the value of what they termed unpaid female labour at home. So what you have is a group of people justifying lazy behaviours to destroy profit-making enterprises that benefit everyone. They also have the cracked-up idea that the exchange of labour must always be compensated. Ridiculous. You are not paid for the DIY you do on your own house, you are not paid for the time you spend in leisure. In short, you are not paid for what does not enrich others. When it comes to motherhood and so-called unpaid labour there, mothers are paid in the growth of their children, in the experiences of raising children, good and bad, in the support they will receive from their children in their old age. Particularly when it comes to Ash Sarkar's libertarian anti-state luxury communism, how on earth would mothers be paid in the first place? By the state? Through theft? How? It's nauseatingly naive, but back to the interview.
All-round massive influence on my own politics. This idea that you can work less if you rethink technology. The work that the autonomists did in terms of propaganda, with Radio Alice, that was a huge influence on the work that we do at Novara Media.
So you've just admitted you produce propaganda, okay?
Yes, I'm gassed. When we occupied our university in 2010, it was like a crash course in activism. Only 2 Labour MPs visited us, and they were Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. And then years later, all the people that I shared that student movement with now work for Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell or the Labour Party, or they're doing things with Momentum.
So what you're saying is you were radicalised into becoming extremists as young, easily influenced teens by Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, and then indoctrinated into serving them as lackeys and minions. Forward unto the destruction of civilization. I wonder how transparent that hiring process was. How fair? How confidence-based?
Can you build and sustain a provocative and irreverent leftist counterculture when at the same time you are wanting to win elections?
Probably not. Probably not, but who cares? You try.
Who cares? I suppose all those people whose lives you ruin if you do eventually get into power, your entire movement is antithetical to state interaction. Go do something somewhere else.
40 years ago, I was not thinking about election. Nowadays, I would speak about the European elections.
We were confronting a broken social contract, the basic social contracts that your generation would have a better standard of living than your parents' generation.
What the hell kind of social contract is that? And where on earth have you derived it from? There is no guarantee of better living standards one generation to the next. It's the hope. It's the goal. But wars happen, disease happens, recessions happen, natural disasters happen. Life is unpredictably difficult and dangerous. And even going by this social contract you've plucked out of thin fucking air, your quality of life has improved on almost every metric. Your access to information and resources have improved. Starvation, dehydration, hypothermia basically eradicated in the West at least. The financial crisis you might mention, that's the fault of government meddling in the banking economy, changing incentives and failing to allow businesses to die at their appointed time. Not a fault of capitalism, a fate of state meddling and overreach into capitalism.
And so that led me to an understanding of communism, to hold in the commons, unmediated by a state, which also at its heart is democratic, is libertarian, has an emphasis on individual as well as collective human flourishing.
Sounds lovely to you, I'm sure, but nothing more than an empty soundbite. How does collective ownership lead to individual and collective flourishing? How does demotivating people, removing fair compensation for investment, destroying the concept of authority and opening up property to be taken over by whoever happens to have the largest stick and the biggest group of friends in any way promote flourishing of any kind?
And that's what takes me back to your work. That's why I think it's so important.
Communism as the political force of a national state is very bad. It's the worst thing I can imagine.
Wait, didn't you just say a moment ago you were trying to get elected, despite how impossible it seemed?
Communist as those who understand that the national state is nothing. What is important is solidarity among people. This is the best thing I know.
And what gives people solidarity? Familiarity, shared values, shared history, shared culture, shared identity. Interesting that Bifo here recognises that, when Ash is all about the erasure of these things so that we can all become one glorious whole. Well, I can tell you who already is one glorious whole. I'm looking at you, Sarkar.
The European Union imposed crippling austerity on Greece.
Congratulations, EU bad, Euro even worse.
It has, through its border regime, led to the deaths of untold thousands in the Mediterranean.
You mean migrants, right? Migrants who are only there because of the insane open borders policy that Europe, in particular Germany and Greece, have imposed on them by the EU. Do you mean that policy where, too late, Europe is realising there is a need for controlled immigration, and that if you obliterate the lines which define your nation's edges, you end up obliterating your nation? You make it fundamentally unrecognisable, culturally damaged, more dangerous, more uncivilised, more violent, and less tolerant overall. Do you mean that people died because the open borders policy led to the mass explosion of the illegal human trafficking industry? That charities literally taught migrants how to scam border officials to make asylum claims and to tell them to lie, resulting in lower trust in asylum claims overall and likely more deaths as a result? Do you mean those deaths, Ash? Those deaths that your policies would also incur?
Shouldn't all leftists be Brexiteers?
Anyone with half a lick of sense should be a Brexiteer.
If I was Jeremy Corbyn, I would call for a second referendum tomorrow morning. Not because I want to go back to the European Union, but because a second referendum would be a declaration of war against neoliberal Europe. would be a proposal of radical renovation of the European Union. Because we are on the brink of civil war. You are on the brink of civil war in the United Kingdom. They are on the brink of civil war in America. We are on the brink of civil war in Italy. The alternative is civil war or a socialist reinvention of technology, work, and social good.
Just like Marx before you, you have radically overestimated the appetite for war in the West, and indeed worldwide at present. The UK is not on the brink of civil war, we haven't even reached the rioting stage and civil disobedience yet. The US is not on the brink of civil war. In fact, Trump's approval rating is remarkably high despite all the attacks on him by the media. I can't speak much for Italy, but last I checked, the only place you could say is struggling with national political violence is France and the Gilets jaunes, and even then, that's unrelated to the battle between socialism and capitalism.
If you accept the idea, which is not so bad, that we can work less, we can consume less, but better, and most of all, we can enjoy more of our time. You see that technology can become a good thing, because more time means more culture, more pleasure, more love, more travels, more teaching mathematics to children, and so on and so on.
Here we see Ash nodding along as if she can't wait to shelve those extra few hours a day and relax. Hate to break it to you, but more technology means an expanding range of jobs, because people who solve problems in one industry either move to others or create entirely new ones. Automation leads to the birth of radically new industries. That's the first thing. Secondly, if you take someone on $500 and 40 hours work per week and tell them your cost of living can now be met with 30 hours, do you think that person will work 30 hours? No, they're going to work 40 hours for that extra $125 so they can invest their capital in other things for the future. Not to mention, employers are going to hire people who want to work 40 hours as opposed to 30 over time. And how would you even enforce this? Mandatory leisure time? Force employers to only offer 30-hour contracts? Insane.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Well, Ash, you shouldn't. Stop being taken in by the utopian wolves in sheep's clothing. Stop being taken in by a dream that has already piled the bodies 100 million high. And maybe, just maybe, you won't be quite the complete idiot you are now anymore.